you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, Nathan. That'll wake you up. That's what she's there for. For 13 years, I had to sing that bit. No one really wanted to hear that. And now somebody else does it, so we certainly love that. As always, we have the most amazing authors and minds on the show, the people to share with you their stories of life, their journeys, their lessons, and help make your life better. And if your life isn't better after listening to the Chris Voss Show, you can go back and listen to all 2,000 episodes in over 16 years, because if you're not getting it, then it could be you. There you go. We have an amazing author on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about her book. It's called Elearning Gold, the ultimate guide for leaders, how to achieve excellence in your distance education and training program. This is always important. Annette Levesque is on the show with us today. She'll be talking to us about her book, her insights, what she does, and how she does it. She's an award-winning author, innovator, educator, and entrepreneur dedicated to building excellence in virtual education and training systems. She holds a master's degree in distance education and founded one of the world's first completely virtual accredited private schools. Today, she shares her expertise with universities, colleges, high schools worldwide to provide distance education opportunities, and is sought after for a consultant for business leaders to advise on employee training programs. As a philanthropist, her mission is to create barrier-free programs for children and women in need of access to education. Welcome to the show, Annette. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Chris. I'm so happy to be here today.
And we're happy to have you as well. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find out more about you on the interwebs?
Yeah, my .com would be AnnetteLevesque.com, and you can find the book at elearninggold.com. And then I'm on all the usual social media stuff.
On all the social media stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
There's always something new they're working on these days. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
Elearning Gold, I wrote this actually during the pandemic. So as we know, during the pandemic was a time when whether you might have been launching or running a face-to-face program, but everybody had to go online, whether they were ready or not. Mm-hmm. I call it basically crisis launches. So everything was sudden, unplanned. And now today, in the post-pandemic world, we still have these systems in place. And, some organizations have spent quite a lot of money on these systems, but they're not quite sure how to evaluate them. Mm-hmm. And many of us in executive positions as well, we're not techies. And, we don't want a book that's just on technology, but we need to know the right questions to ask our tech teams to measure the health of our programs. So this is a toolbox of sorts to help make that job easy.
There you go. And I mean, remote work, remote training, remote education is probably, for the most part, here to stay. Aren't you finding after COVID is kind of rounded up?
Absolutely. And I mean, some of these systems are big ticket items for organizations. So they've invested the time and money, and now it's just time to pause and evaluate them and figure out what to do with them and to make these programs successful.
And why is it different to train over, and when you say distance, like a lot of times you mean online or remote, I guess. Why is it so difficult to train in person and monitor the results and et cetera, as opposed to distance and remote?
The differences between distance and face-to-face, one of the primary differences is the level of engagement that we have with someone. There's many levels of distance learning, and they use the terms like distance learning, e-learning, online learning, virtual learning. It all refers to the same thing. And there's different levels of engagement in different types of learning. So in a classroom, if I have a question or things aren't going well, you can have a pretty not great course and a really awesome teacher, and the teacher can kind of make up for that. In a virtual learning system, the teacher acts more as a facilitator. The roles are very different depending on the type of course. So if the course is not good, and if if you don't abide by some instructional design principles, and if there isn't training for teachers, then it can be a really poor experience for learners. And you see things more like, so when classroom courses aren't going well, we'll see high failure rates. You'll have the whole school and there's that one class where, and I used to get the calls sometimes in virtual learning where everybody, more than 50% of the kids are not passing. And there's a reason for that. In virtual learning, you'll see more incompletes. So people just drop. We get bored. We don't want to finish it. We're not engaged. And that's a huge problem for organizations.
Yeah, it's because, when you're sitting in a classroom, you're kind of in a contained environment. In my childhood, it was more like a prison, but school, no, it wasn't too bad. I mean, you're right. Teachers that were amazing and energetic, energy cells and charismatic. I mean, I had some that, they made history come alive. And history, can be, it's not, it's not as fun as, I don't know. I don't have a joke for that. It's funny how that's a joke. But, and then other times, there were classes where you could see everyone in the room was on their desk drooling out the side of their mouth because they were so bored out of their mindset, even by a live teacher. But, you're in a contained environment. You're there to train. And I imagine at home there's so much distraction, too, that you're competing with as well. Like, kids and, dogs and cats and going get food or, just doing anything like screwing around on the computer playing video games or something rather than learning.
Exactly. And I mean, virtual learning in its origins, it was never really designed to replace face-to-face learning fully. During the pandemic, I heard of kids spending 7 hours a day online on their computer, and I was just like, no, don't do it. It wasn't intended for that. It was intended to supplement what we're doing, or, to fill in the blanks for things that face-to-face, there's some really great perks to it that face-to-face classrooms cannot do. As you said, when it's completely online, and if there's no engagement, it can be it's like a snooze fest.
And yeah, I can see that because I've taken online courses for fun. Usually it was when I ran a stop sign in Vegas, and I had to take an online course to have the ticket wiped. And I think you had to do it for 2 hours too. And there was like a timer it monitored you. It was one of the first times I'd seen the online course. This is a decade or so ago before, everybody decided to do remote work. But yeah, I some of these courses can be sleepers, I guess. And I imagine there was a thought I had about this, but it has totally escaped me. It'll come back to me. Let's talk about your origins. It sounds like you got into understanding education and distance learning way before COVID, and you kind of had this game down, and COVID just kind of met you where it was at with its remote work.
So I did, but just before that, wait a minute. You can take an online course to wipe a ticket for sure.
In Nevada, you can. Nevada isn't in collusion with insurance companies like other states are.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
we're in Canada.
Oh, you're in Canada? I don't know what you guys do up there.
I don't think we can get
sorry and then everything's okay.
I don't know. I guess sometimes it works, but I have a friend that would really like that, online course system and would wipe the ticket for sure. Yeah. That's really interesting. I had not heard of that.
So what Nevada figured out is that the more tickets you get, the higher your insurance goes. So the insurance companies make all the money. So they decided that if that's going to be the game you're going to play, we'll just have people pay an extra fee. So I think I had to pay like $150 for the course or something. And then they'll take a course. They'll be smarter on the road, which is smart governance. And then we keep the money instead of the insurance company.
Sounds like a good plan.
That's brilliant. So you have a smarter public base or whatever you want to call it, citizen, and then you keep the money for yourself. Because people here in America, everything's a money scam, as you probably know, watching us from Canada, where you guys are like, what are those drunken idiots doing down there? We're like your guys' drunken brother who's always starting fights and wars and stuff. And you guys are like, why are we within nuke proximity of these idiots? So there you go.
As a Canadian, I cannot comment on any of those things.
You guys are like the good half of North America. You guys are the nice people. Plus, you guys originated Rush, so we got to, and Second City comedy. We got to give you that.
Sure.
So, how did you get interested in this? How did you kind of grow up, get motivated, and find your way into this business? What was your journey there?
Yes, the origin story. So I've always been fascinated with technology, even back in the days where I think I didn't have a first laptop till maybe teacher's college. I'm dating myself here, but I've always been really fascinated with it. And I've always been able to kind of figure things out, I guess, on my own. And you combine that with a bookworm and kind of an entrepreneur degree. I finished my education degree, and I had my first teaching position, actually, filling in for somebody who was on leave. And I was offered a full-time job. And this is a really common scenario we actually see today still. But the criteria for that new role and to be full-time, I didn't actually have the qualification to be teaching what I was teaching at that time. And so the principal said, we'd love to offer this to you full time, but if you want to continue with us, you're going to have to get this qualification. And I started looking for the qualification, and the closest university offering it was five and a half hours away from my home. And I mean, I was just starting my new job. I owned a home. I had responsibilities. I couldn't just pick up for 6 months and head on off to live 6 hours away. So I found, it was actually, I think the University of Western Ontario was offering it online, and it was a beta. It was brand new. Nobody was doing this. Like, it's not happening. And so I thought, this is fabulous. So I took the course. And while I was in it, I just thought, this is so amazing. I'm collaborating with other teachers who are doing the same thing. I'm working from my lazy boy chair at home on my own schedule. This is fantastic, like fan-friggin-tastic. And then, of course, I'm half educator, half innovator. My brain started ticking, and I started thinking, wow, why don't we have this for high school students who need to be gone away from school on medical leave for a few weeks, and they're missing content and then tested on things they haven't learned, or for amateur athletes that need to be away from school, or adults that want to go back and maybe they missed a credit that they've told nobody about and they want to discreetly get it done. Like, this is a fantastic option to be doing this. And
they were just sloughing school and then they couldn't pass the test. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you hit your 30s, Chris, and you realize, I needed that credit because, I want to do something else now. No, you didn't get it.
No, I actually wrote about this in my book. So in my school, you needed to have 26 credits to graduate high school. And I knew that it was pretty much worthless what I was being taught. About the only thing I learned that was really important out of school was typing. And that was so that I could type invoices and write business letters to do business. But that was pretty much the rest of my education was largely worthless. In America, I don't know what you guys are doing up in Canada. You guys seem to produce better people up there and funnier people from Second City. But except for Nickelback.
I love Nickelback.
They're a good
Shame
band.
on you.
I love Nickelback too. They get, for some reason, they become this meme of kick around. And you can have Justin Bieber back, please. Take him back, please, for love of God. But no, so I figured out that there was 26 credits I needed to graduate high school, and if I took all the stupid courses that weren't doing anything for me, I was gonna have 48 credits, and I'm like, why am I working this hard? Anyway. That's a joke bit there, but it's true. Let's move on to your origin story again.
No, what you're describing is actually really common. And that was one of the other things that kind of ticked off for me was that, if you're not interested, especially in, let's say, smaller schools or remote regions, Canada's got a lot of remote regions. If you're not interested in math, English, science, or history, in the public system, schools, they need to fill the classroom with 30 students. And not everybody wants to take organizational behavior or introduction to psychology or really interesting courses. And so my thought process was, why can't we create these courses as an add-on? We're not trying to replace, the face-to-face classroom, but wouldn't it be fantastic if a grade 12 student could have 3 courses in the classroom and then add the 4th one online as an intro to psych, and they're joining students from around the world or, around your region. So with that in mind, go ahead. If you don't
mind me cutting in on you again, I'm sorry, but I think this is a good point. One of the challenges that I had as a kid was I had massive ADHD, and I still have a massive ADHD. Squirrel. And one of the problems was the format of learning in the classroom, a prison. You have to sit here for 2 hours and listen to this. was not conducive to my ADHD. And ADHD is what they call the CEO disease. A lot of successful CEOs have it. It's what makes us great at innovating. We're just mad scientists, really, when it comes down to it. And we're great at tinkering, and we're great at thinking outside the box. And having a format that's like what you're talking about with remote learning, where I can do things at my pace and do things when I can tune in and I can defocus on stuff, and then I can focus again, is much more conducive to at least people with ADHD. Maybe people that are also have other learning disabilities. And I don't know that we need to call them disabilities, that, we're actually smarter than other people. People that, they read backwards, dyslexic people, they might need more time to learn, or more time to, soak up something or marinate in it so they can learn it. I don't know. But stuff what you're talking about in remote learning and learning where you can do things kind of at your own pace, because that was my thing. Cramming me in. Our school system was a block system at the time. They called it a block system. So basically, it was 4 or 5 classes of an hour and a half at a time. And that's a long time to be in there. Normally, classes before a block system would be, I think, 45 minutes or an hour, and it would be like, 8 classes in a day. And it's just a long time to be trapped in a school, having stuff, trying to keep focus on all that crap. And I think they found the block system, I don't know, maybe you would retain data better, but it was still like 6 hours or 8 hours in locked in a school, and it just wasn't conducive to, I don't know, people like me. And I started my first company. I was 18 and built multi-millionaire companies all my life, and most of my school was breeding and having kids, and I don't know, working at Chevron gas stations at my age. So it's not like I was stupid and wasn't going anywhere. I didn't even do college. I mean, I was like you. I'm one of those people who learns on the fly. So anyway, I just want to get that plug in there. What do you think about that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think specifically with learners that have ADHD, it's really great to, when you're in the classroom. I actually have a niece that has epilepsy. And up until about a year ago, they didn't realize she was having about 100 blip seizures a day, where she would space out in the classroom and nobody really knew it, but she was always getting in trouble for losing, focus and attention. And for students, I call it learners who learn differently, because I don't like disabilities either. Yeah. I think it, assigns a label and that you have to fit. It's great to learn about, what strategies can you be using, but it kind of slots people into a box. So I'm not a fan either. But, I call it mastery learning. So you can finish where you left off, and then maybe you had to take that break because the bright, shiny new object caught your attention or whatever it was that day, but you just come back to where you left off. But that being said, there has to be balance and a balance of engagement. The courses you were describing in your block system that were really, really too long, we can still have that today in conferences and seminars. And it's not really about the duration of the program. It's the lack of interactivity and engagement that's happening. If I'm speaking to you for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you're going to get together with your little team to work on something, right? That provides a break, and then it reinvigorates you. It's not draining, but having somebody talk at you for over an hour, that's not a good time for anybody.
Yeah. So what do you think about Zoom meetings? During COVID, my friends, and I think some of them are still in that engagement, my friends were going through 8 to 10 hours of Zoom meetings that were mindless. 80% of them, I guess, could have been just like an email. And they were just getting burnt the hell out with Zoom meetings.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And, a part of that is, again, it was the same thing that happened with schools launching, crisis launching programs. Nobody really knew. We didn't have the tools and the criteria of how do we create a really great, engaging Zoom meeting, and how long should we actually be on Zoom for the meeting before we're doing something else or collaborating offline. You can't be talking to a computer is not great for our brains for that many hours during the day. And so I think the criteria became we need to replace what we're doing. And this is what happens a lot in practices from classroom learning to online learning. We just try to replace what you were doing in the classroom, but it doesn't work the same way in an online environment. And we're not asking ourselves, is this effective? Is learning actually happening after the 8-hour meeting? Are people engaged?
I remember what I'd forgot about when you mentioned that, it's different when it's not in person. So we've had a lot of scientists on the show that are the brain scientists, and I'm stupid enough because I clearly skipped some of my school to not remember what they're called, but I should have stayed in that one class. But they're brain scientists who study the mind. And what they talk about on the show is these two-dimensional screens world that we live in, the phones, the computers and stuff. Our brains aren't wired for this at all. Our brains are wired for three-dimensional interactional experience, one-on-one human beings to each other, where we can monitor not only facial monitors, facial cues, facial body language, but also body language of the rest of the body. You can see hands, you can see movement, energy flows through the whole body, especially if you're like a great teacher, a charismatic leader. And when people can't see that whole picture, their brains get stunted. They're like, what's going on? And that's why we're having real problems with our society and people being able to be intimate with each other and be able to have conversations. I mean, I call people and they're terrorized to have a phone call now here in America. Why are you calling me? We have people that, I'll even have people that will come to the door to deliver something and they'll honk and send a text message. I'm out front at the curb. And you're like, Jesus, is it too hard to walk 20 feet to the door? You might meet me. It's really interesting. So they've talked about this and how number one, it's bad for us. And I imagine it probably impacts learning as well, because you don't have the three-dimensional teacher in front of you.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same actually with our learning materials. I was always torn on the topic of digital books because they're so convenient. And when I used to work on projects in developing countries where it can be really, really hard to get a book there, that's the option you're using. But we know that when we have a physical book that you can tangibly feel and you can flip the pages and you can highlight it and you can, navigate it and come back to it, it's not the same experience. And we don't digest the same amount of learning as when we're reading it completely online. Definitely. But we compensate, we compromise, and all of it is about balance.
Yeah. I was having that problem where I was trying to do 100 books read a year, and I was banging through Audible at like 2.5 times speed. So the author's like, and we had somebody come on the show who talked about reading retention. They're like, so tell me a recent book that you read, Chris. And I told him, and he goes, so what do you remember from the book? And I'm like, the title.
Yeah.
I'm like, and he's like, no, you really need to get the book. You need to sit down. You need to mark it up. You need to, like you said, you need to mark it up. You need to make notes. You need to come back to it. That's how you learn. And he really made me rethink what I was doing. And I'm like, I'm just like processing information in and out. It's just going right through the ether of my brain. So there you go. So. So you help advise a lot of companies and different people in investing in continuous learning and professional development. Why is it so crucial for organizations in today's business environment to start really looking at this as an investment, a long-term thing too, I guess, because it's going to be here for a while?
I would actually say that, way back when, if companies offered employee training plans and programs, we kind of saw it as an add-on or a perk. It wasn't something that would necessarily maybe steer our decision and what company to work for, but it was, a valuable addition to the list of benefits that you could receive working with a company. But today, I would say we've gone more now from it being an option to it being critical to a company's success. And I think that in today's world and era, especially with AI, the skill sets that we've acquired, the shelf life on those skill sets has never been shorter. We used to just invest in online training. We saw it more as upskilling or career advancement to move towards that better job. But actually, it needs to happen now to be able to retain your existing competencies within your current role and to be able to remain competitive as a company and to be able to react to change. If learning and if employee training is part of a company's culture, then when new things like AI, come up, like a massive sort of flipping the world on its belly come about, it's not such a culture shift to have to invest in learning time to be on par and be up to date.
There you go. How can virtual learning worlds enhance access to professional training opportunities for employees? How can, if I'm a leader, how can I look at that as a way that we can make employees better?
You really need to start by, when we're creating these programs for our employees and our staff, by talking to them to see, what skills. A lot of times we launch courses and we don't ask or we don't check in to see what do people already know and what do they need. So using surveys, and even in learning, so back in high school when you were bored, if they would have asked you and said, we want you to do this project, you said you've been a CEO at a number of different, or had a number of different companies. If you were taking a course and I asked you to write a business plan, you would be like, so you need to know, what do you already know? And then what do you need to know when you're building the plan? And then the other critical component, I think, is that, when we're asking employees to do training and it's an add-on to their existing workloads and their days, they're not going to be as engaged, spending 4 hours on their Saturday or their Friday. At least I know I'm not on a Friday night, conducting this learning. So it's really great when one of the schools that I had, we had on Fridays, we subsidized a certain amount of learning for each staff member related to their role, and they could engage in that during work time. Like it's the same as innovation time for product development, if you will. It was, employee upskilling time. So building it into part of the culture, not making it extra work, is more likely to get people on board and excited about it and engaged.
I like what you're saying. Make sure that you recognize that we don't need to be adding more homework or more work to what people are already doing. I used to hate that. I worked, before I worked for myself, there was an environment I worked at a corporate thing where they were constantly having these, we have an improvement meeting you need to come to. And I'm like, I have projects I have to get done today. And do you just think I got nothing better to do all day than attend your little thing there? And so I think being mindful of that and trying to, like the Zoom meeting thing, I was so glad I didn't work for other people during that whole thing. And I think some people are still doing it. I mean, I'll see people complaining about it on Facebook, like, I'm just in a Zoom eternity. And I'm just thinking, oh my God. And you always have the idiot who's asking all the dumb questions in the corner that has no business being there. Amazon has a great policy that they developed decades ago, I guess, where when they do meetings, they make everyone stand at the meeting. There's no chairs.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. It actually helps those Zoom meetings get over really quick. They in person that they were doing it, but when you're standing, they find that people got to the point much more quicker than they do when they're just lollygagging and everyone's sitting in a chair going, So there you go. I mean, it's really important people understand this is this remote learning's here to stay. A lot of companies here in America are trying to claw back people in the office, and the resistance is incredibly high. I think people have found that they're just more. They just benefit more from a higher quality of life. What are some of the key factors that contribute to successful integration of virtual learning environments with existing training programs?
So again, you definitely want to have your employees and your staff on board with what you want them to be vested in it, because there's definitely an intrinsic value to pursuing any type of upskilling, and they need to know what that is. Like, what benefit is it going to have to them? And then training adults is very different than training younger learners. And training needs to be designed with some of those core principles in mind. In the book, I provide a checklist that organizations can go through. So some of the criteria is, adults don't like busy work. We don't have a lot of time. We want to get right to it. Tell us what to do. Tell us what we need to know, but not always more than we need to know right now. Micro learning is really popular right now for adults, where you have small, less than 10-minute segments of learning that usually have immediate relevancy to something that you're doing. That's super popular.
That would have been good with me with ADHD. 10-minute learning, or, I can do 15 or 20 probably.
I think everybody's is dealing with a version of that now because there's so much information overload coming at us, and there's so much information out there that we have to try to validate and turn it into knowledge that when you can just, we want to be learning things that have immediate relevancy to what we're doing. You don't want to be training on something you're not going to use a year from now because you're not going to remember it. Mm-hmm. So relevancy is one of those key criteria. Is it relevant? I looked at a study put out by a skills development company, and they said that 33% of adults that were involved in employee training programs felt disengaged because they felt the training wasn't related to anything they were doing.
Oh, wow.
So they found it hard to stay motivated, of course, if you're learning something. They said another 25% found they just quickly forgot the training, and then 24% said that they just lacked the time to complete it, right? So those are the things that companies need to address if they truly want to get their teams involved and on board. So that's not just a checkbox that we're checking to say we offer the training, here it is, but what benefit is it bringing to our company?
Definitely. It's and I imagine cost effectiveness is the same as well on how companies can offset the cost of it, because that's something they always look at. How much is it going to cost us? And I imagine in your book you help companies and leaders take a look at what employee training is going to cost, and by making it cost effective, I imagine, is the key to offsetting how much the investment makes.
Mm-hmm. And the major criteria to making it cost effective is making sure the actual training is effective. Mm-hmm. The Association for Training and Development, they did a study and they found that companies that invested in employee training actually experienced 24% higher profit margins.
Wow.
But that's if it's effective, relevant, engaging training, right? So there is a core benefit to that. And the cost factor, you're right, is the number one roadblock to CEOs and companies. They want to know, why should we invest in this training? What happens if we invest in employees and they leave? Mm-hmm. So these are major concerns for them. And I always say, what happens if they stay?
Yeah.
But
now, what happens if they stay? There's a famous old story. I think it's from IBM, where a executive vice president lost. He did some sort of deal where he lost like $11 or $12 million or something of that nature, and he came into the CEO to tender his resignation, and the CEO said, "We just spent $11 million educating you what not to do. We're not going to fire you." And what you said is a way to think about it. So in doing these professional development opportunities, I imagine employee retention and attracting top talent help. Is there some numbers behind that and percentages, or how much it can help with the employee retention?
It definitely helps with employee retention. It's one of the major attractions right now for employees and recruiting top talent. People who are in high-level positions and perform at a high level, they know that employee training is going to have so much value to them. Percentages, I don't have percentages for training and attracting, but I did actually see several different studies. It's always in the positive frame that, of course, people feel more satisfied, they feel more engaged to their employer, and for the most part, they feel more loyal to an employer that's invested in training for them. You are, of course, going to have cases that you were describing before I went AWOL of, people who leave, and some companies offset that with, if it's a larger investment in training, maybe there's a contract for an employability period. But but overall, it definitely, I picture it when we go to a conference. Do you remember the day? I don't know if you do conferences, but you go to a conference and you collaborate with other people and you learn new things and you feel really reinvigorated and you bring that back to your organization. And it lasts for a period of time until we get to do something else that's new and reinvigorating. But it really helps a company culture. And all of those things contribute to employee retention.
Wow. There you go. The smarter your employees are, the better they can be. I mean, that's really it. And then, of course, I think learning over a time of a lifetime makes the difference too. If you can, I've talked about this ad nauseum on the show. People are going to be like, he's going to say Peter Senge again. Peter Senge had that great book, The Fifth Discipline, and how to build a learning organization. And so having people that are constantly learning and evolving, if you have the people that don't, you want to wash them out. Microsoft washes like 10% of its workforce out. There's just always a curve of people. And, you have people that they don't want to learn. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to grow. They don't want to change. Those aren't people you really want in your company long term. They can go back to McDonald's. Sorry, I'm just mean that way. Tough love. That's what I deliver. But, you want the people who are growing, because you want most of the people in your organization to rise up through that organization and become the leaders and eventually your CEOs. Pulling CEOs outside of a corporation it's a good idea sometimes, I guess, if it's a rock star CEO. But for the most part, you want people who they know the corporation, they've worked for it for decades inside of it. They understand the culture there. They understand some of the problems and things that are wrong with it internally that sometimes upper management doesn't see. And you want those people to rise through the corporation with education and learning. And that makes all the difference in the world, I think.
The people you're describing, they have an integrated lens, right? And that's part of what I do when I go to organizations. If you've only ever worked in one role at a company, you have one lens and one perspective on how things should operate. But when I started way back when with 4 courses online in my first school and less than 50 students, and I had to build the course, teach the course, launch the company, get the schools accredited, then grow internationally when you've gone through that whole process. So now when I visit an organization and I look at their programs, I have a very integrated lens on how different variables can impact one another to create success or drastic issues within a problem. So retaining your employees, as you've just described, and providing those opportunities for advancement, it has a great benefit to companies.
Definitely. You mentioned it great, where it just helps so much. And this is your future leadership for your organization. Usually, the people are going to get promoted into, from whatever the workforce level is at to management. And, you've got to plan for these people, because if they're not rising through the organization and getting better, over time, you've seen people where it's like, hey, I'm the CEO and I started the bottom. I started the entry level 40 years ago or 30 years ago. And so it's so important to know this. So as we round out about your book, let's talk about some of the offerings that you do on your website that people can get to know. It looks like you do some speaking and maybe some courses and consulting. Tell us about what you're offering there and how people can get to know you better there.
Yeah, on my website, you can contact me through my website, but I do a lot of teacher training, seminars, conferences. I've done a lot of international teacher training, which is a lot of fun as well. But, right now in the current times, we also have, when I did my own master's in distance education, Chris, it wasn't available. I think I finished it around 2016. I had to do it later in life. And even any teachers I was hiring within my own schools, very few of them had any experience teaching in a distance learning program. So that's one of the criteria. If you're offering an employee training program, you need to have instructors that know about engagement and know some of these principles. And they're just not ready. They're still in 2024 not readily available to them, because there's not enough people who've done the full journey from way back when to today. You can find information certainly on how to build a great course and how to now teach with Zoom. Those things are coming about, but the actual boots on the ground training needs to happen. So I will do that for organizations. And then, sometimes I'll train a lead teacher who's training their teachers on an ongoing basis after I leave. And I'll have a declining consulting value basically within an organization. One of the primary roles I serve right now, when I have time, I take on a limited number of clients each year where I'll conduct a needs assessment. So maybe they've got a really great program that they've invested in, and they're seeing really high incomplete rates, a lot of the symptoms of an ailing program, and they just don't know why. They purchased a $50,000 a year learning management system. They've got the best technology, and they really need someone to go through the journey from point A, that learners and participants' entry into their funnel right through the course to the end, to determine, all right, where are the areas that we need to do some checks and balances and create some fixes for the program so that it can be successful.
There you go. So how can people reach out to you? How can they onboard with you? How can they, find out if your services are fit for them?
They can email me through the website at AnnetteLevesque.com, or they can send me an email. I'm going to say it out loud. I hope it's not, I don't get a lot of spam from this, but alevesque at AnnetteLevesque.com will get a hold of me. And please do, even if you just have a question, I love building new projects, and I love helping people make their learning visions come true and resolve these issues. Yeah, I don't like to stay. I won't run the program. I did that for 15 years, and that was fun too. But I build it and I hand it off with a bow, and then I move along.
There you go. Annette, it's been wonderful and fun and energetic to have you on the show. We certainly appreciate it. We actually learned a lot. So there you go. And I didn't find any squirrels. So
I learned a lot too. I learned that if I get a speeding ticket in the U.S., I take a course to get out of it. That's pretty cool.
Nevada. The other states are in collusion usually with the insurance companies. I don't know. There might be a lot more people who figured out that scam the states, and now they're like, we're going to keep the money. But everything here is. As you guys have, what is it, national health insurance? Down here, everything's about money and profit and about just farming human beings for every damn dollar they can have. Welcome to capitalism. It's so great. But you guys got moose. There's that.
The moose. We have the moose. Yes, actually.
Nickelback.
I'm very astounded by how many people actually lose a vehicle in Canada to hitting a moose. Do they really? People think we live in igloos or something because of that. I'm like, that's astounding. My mother lost her vehicle because she hit like a deer. It wasn't a moose. It was a deer, but it totaled her vehicle. It's astounding.
Yeah, those things are huge. Like I've seen videos. I think they might have been from Alaska or Canada, where they just decide to tear up a car one day that's parked out front. And you're just like, people are running from them, and you're just like, yeah, it's a big animal with giant ass horns, and I guess if you get pissed off enough, you take out a car or whatever. But yeah,
yes,
horses, moose. I mean, you got that. I still think of anytime I think of Canada, I think of the Mounties, those dudes. Like all the cartoons just had Mounties in them, so you grew up that way, and you're like thinking that's pretty much how people live in Canada. They're just riding horses around and chasing moose and bears or something, and it's always snowing. That's the image you guys have. But at least you guys have a nicer image. You guys, always say sorry all the time. We never apologize for anything as the asshole Americans, And, you guys are always saying a and a boot. So there you go. Annette, it's been fun to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on. Give us your .coms as we go out one last time. It's
AnnetteLevesque.com, and my book can be found at elearninggold.com. Thank you so much, Chris. It was wonderful.
Thank you, and thanks for coming on. Thanks, Ron, for tuning in as well. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one of the TikTok, and all those crazy places around on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, or else we'll see you next time.